Hello once again, everyone. I've done a lot of longsword content on the channel recently with occasional forays into other things, and I really ought to start giving some more love to backsword and rapier, so consider this my first step of my late New Year's resolution. Now, what I want to talk about here is right now my rapier class is doing their first foray into sword and dagger, and oftentimes when you put a second weapon in someone's hand, be it a shield, be it a dagger, be it another equal weapon, be it an asymmetrical weapon, the thing that's going to happen is splitting of the mind, right? This one, this one, this one, this one, and that is ineffective. As we know, they are best used together, right, in combination. So for example, sword, I almost said buckler, but that's the way it goes, sword, dagger, sword, right? Using things in tandem. For example, when I attack, I don't just want to be attacking and this is doing nothing. I want this to be covering me in some way, which is where you get your 4 dagger parries. Now, something else that can help with that, because that's a good start, don't get me wrong, but more specifically, let's talk about how the attributes of this are just expanded upon by this. And certain things that can start to become, let's say, less prevalent in your mind when you've got another thing in your hand. So, specifically when it comes to sword alone, having the hand down is not necessarily that great of an idea, right? I want to extend the arm, so that way, as you see from your perspective, the guard gets a lot bigger, which means that no matter which position I turn myself into, of all 3 technically, but well, all 4, I am widening up the angle as you approach me. So, for example, just pure physics here, if I turn into quarta, anything coming along this line is going to be widened out past me, like a rock in a river. Secunda, same thing that side. Prima, technically the same thing up. Terza, same thing down. It's just these 2 aren't necessarily all that useful in this regard. Secunda and quarta being the most useful. Now, this is already pretty well understood by most people who have done a decent amount of time with any sword, let alone a rapier, but the idea being extend, turn, make your wedge, you're nice and safe. When you add a dagger, what you want to start thinking about is an extra layer on top of that. So looking at just the dagger parries themselves, it's the same exact thing, right? So my sword is still going out, but this is taking place of my guard. And certainly that allows me to be a little bit more open, and sometimes a little bit more disconnected with where that thrust goes, since this can hold as a consistent. And that's good, don't get me wrong, especially if you've got the initiative and can trick someone into letting you get your dagger on their sword. So for example, standing with the dagger a little bit more exposed, if you can creep in, catch hold of their sword, then you can lunge freely to pretty much any target you want, almost in any guard you want. You just have to worry about getting around theirs. However, when it comes to making these dagger parries a little bit more tricksy without being obvious, something that I find beneficial is to focus on this game didn't stop. Everything I'm still doing here is still treating it almost as though it's sword alone, with the understanding that the actions taken here are going to cause consequences here. So if you think about the 4 openings, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? To the narrow game, they're still there, but they're a lot smaller, right? By just turning my guard, I can already cover most of those, right? 1, 2, pretty much done, slightly higher, slightly lower. 1, 2, slightly higher, slightly lower, no problem, right? Usually directed with the tip as opposed to my guard, which you get what I'm saying. However, if you get around that, you start getting into those same openings kind of widening out as they get to me, are there again, right? Once you get past this, that reappears. That then becomes the zone of the dagger, right? Up high and low. So what I think people should attend to keep these a little more connected and also get this working for you a little more, is when you come into guard, be sure to extend, keep the dagger ready to go, right? Do all of your normal actions. Let's take Capaferro's first sword and dagger play, for example. Find the sword in quarta, revoking them to cavazione, and attack 1 of 2 targets, either my chest or my face. At this point, I could, of course, turn in the counter thrust, but I don't need to, right? Because I've got the dagger ready. Find the sword, let them cavazione. I'm doing this nice and extended. They're coming in from my face. Once that's coming into my opening, I wait, now. And then I have my opportunity to hit. This first one in quartet, the second one being scuda. The point being, let this do its job in its zone. A common mistake I see, and I've done it too, is as this comes out, you'll try to reach for it, which crosses up your arm, shortens this guy. Alternatively, they try to sweep. This is just the same way I would parry if an attack was coming in with my sword. It's now come into this zone, over. Deal with it. And that's true of all of the attacks. So that's what I'm kind of getting at, is the idea of having a layered defense, with the understanding that this is sword zone. Sword needs to do its job. This is dagger zone. Dagger needs to do its job. Now occasionally, they can overlap and marry and do other such things. They can work with each other. But as a baseline of using this to good advantage, let people come in, if you're going to. Now you're running a risk, of course, because you're pairing with a smaller weapon, but it's not too hard to reinforce that, hence why my hand always turns over kind of on reflexes. That's the way I learned it. But the benefits are, of course, pretty obvious. So that's kind of what I wanted to go over, is just that idea of, you've got your guards, sometimes you've got retracted or extended or what have you, favoring things, but let this start doing its job. Force them to either fight you on the sword or try to go all the way around and start walking into one of two traps. Because I can still just counter thrust in porta, with a passing step or what have you, right? Segunda rather. Or I can start employing that dagger if you get close, which is also going to start building into your mind a sort of automatic rangefinder. When a tip is still out here, I should be fighting with the sword, and sure, the dagger's there, but I don't need to use it right now, right? This is still sword alone for the majority of my fight. But something slipped past, I wasn't expecting that, boom. Now that dagger's ready to go, because it's entered his zone of the fight. Much the same idea of, in theory, if I have an empty hand, I can grab at any point. I can also parry the sword with certain points, but that doesn't mean that I should be standing like this, ready to grab. What it means is that this is here, right, or glued to me, or what have you, and it's waiting to do its job. When that opportunity presents itself, now it comes out with the support or the tying up or what have you. So, and of course, in regards to buckler versus dagger or cloak or what have you, there will be slight alterations depending upon the tool in your hand, but especially with dagger, because it's got a pointy end on it, treat it like a little companion, right? It's going to keep this zone tight to you relatively secure, and then later it will have more out in front of you opportunities as you become more comfortable with it. But in general, it's guarding you here, your sword's guarding you out there, and the same is true of your empty hand or any other offhand weapon with some slight altering ideas. I just wanted to talk about that, a bit of a ramble, I know, but this is a concept that I haven't necessarily articulated very much, and I think it is a very, very beneficial one. So, let me know what you think. Specifically though, I just want to, anytime you're carrying sword and dagger together, this is more of a hazard than a help if it is trying to do too much and people forget about all that wonderful sword skill that they learned with the sword alone, as you really should become very proficient in this before you try picking up this. Of course, it's still fun, mind you, but you'll do much better that way, layering on top of a game rather than learning a whole new one. But either way, thank you very, very much for watching. We'll go over some other techniques another time.